transformation and returns changed, bringing insight and value to others. Which brings us to, what is the feminine version of it? Because that sort of hero's journey has long served as the archetypal template for men's development. But the question of today's session is what happens if the hero is a woman? Do we apply the same phases? I'm pretty sure our female listeners often find themselves in the midst of that journey. Is it any different from the hero journey? Maybe just start with that, and then we'll go into what the feminine principle is. And Eleftheria, before you begin, so to paint the story right for the listeners, like imagine you have a high-performing woman in front of you in a corporate role. On paper, she has everything. She has the title, she has the salary, she has the recognition, but inside, she's really exhausted. She feels like she has to constantly perform and push and to be on all the time and fit with that linear, aggressive, always on culture. And at some point, she realizes that she's lost touch with herself. And she doesn't even know what she feels or want anymore. So that is, for many of us, the beginning of that journey. And that is, rather than the conquering of the world story, this is an inner journey back to ourselves. And that's what we call the heroine journey, right? So with that said, can you talk a little bit, Eleftheria, about this heroine journey? What is the feminine principle of that? How is it when the hero is a woman?
Thank you. I'm really glad we started with this topic because I'm so passionate about this, and I kind of want to start by just prefacing that Joseph Campbell, I think, was a really inspiring man, a visionary that was way beyond his time. And that understanding of the monomyth was really, really important, and that it's a template that we all deeply resonate with. And so any books or movies that are written according to the story arc really does well. And in fact, a few producers went to Joseph Campbell to actually write some of the movies according to the template, and it did really, really well because we really resonate with it en masse. Even neurobiologically, we're wired for story. And so when we hear the story of the hero that goes through struggle and then discovers, parts of himself, and then our bodies naturally start producing oxytocin. And so we really, really are wired for story. That's number one. Number two is that I feel really privileged to know that our ancestors left us this map of transformation through story. And when we can really identify with the story, understand it properly, we can identify where we or our teams or life or the world is during those stages of change. When we can identify where we are, it's not so overwhelming. We don't fall back into self-sabotaging, limiting beliefs or anything like that, because we can say, right now, I'm in the dark night of the soul. And there's a lot of myths, that give us all of this wisdom. So that's what I want to start with. Then once this monomyth, and Joseph Campbell wrote a book, if you're interested, it's great. It's called, not going to get it right, The Man with 1,000 Faces, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Yes, it is.
He wrote a couple, but that one was really fascinating. And so at the same time, in 1983, a Jungian psychotherapist called Maureen Murdoch read the monomyth and was really taken by it and thought, wow, this is really some powerful work if we can connect with it. But she was working with women in the corporate world and noticed that this is beautiful, but there's an aspect that she's seeing in her practice of the feminine that isn't represented. And so she met with Joseph Campbell. She developed her own heroine's journey, what's called the heroine's journey. Really great book. I would encourage you to, I think every woman needs to have that book on her bookshelf. And she met with Joseph Campbell and presented her model to him. And this is what he said. And I would love to not misquote, but I'd like to read this quote. Joseph Campbell said, "Women don't need to make the journey. In the whole mythological journey, the woman is there. All she has to do is realize that she's the place that people are trying to get to."
Wow.
And so that for me is the feminine. In a different way I like to use an analogy is, very often the masculine principle in all of us, but the masculine is active. And so you will see another analogy for this is, the masculine has a goal. And so there's a mountain and you climb and climb the mountain, you get to the top of the mountain and you put your flag in the mountain and you go, I have conquered the mountain. And the feminine stands and says, I am the mountain. Okay. It's another way of understanding this. So yes, and so with the work of Maureen Murdoch, the heroine's journey is really an internal journey rather than an external journey. Again, that's the masculine and the feminine principles. The masculine is active, the feminine is receptive. Outer world versus inner world. And that's what's so powerful about it. Yeah.
That's really actually the other part of the story that we're usually not told, that we usually don't know, because everything we see out there in the world is this outside external journey. And so that was really important for everybody to hear our side of the journey, to acknowledge it, to understand that it's different. But we're going to get into it a bit more from a practical point of view, right?
Yeah.
And maybe we start with just defining, what is the feminine principle? That's the basic question. Can you explain it in a way why feminine principle has nothing to do with the gender, and that it's more of a quality of the energy?
Yeah, with pleasure. And I think that's a really great place to start so that we don't get confused around it. So the feminine and the masculine principles that we're going to be speaking about has got nothing to do with gender. We all have the masculine and the feminine principles within us. And practically, what does that mean? It means that the masculine principle is logic, structure, productivity, for example, and the feminine is its counterpart, but in balance and in beautiful harmony, a complement to it. So the feminine principle is intuition, so logic and intuition. It is creativity. It is cyclical thinking, long-term thinking. It is emotional body. So here's the thing that I think a lot of people often come to counseling or maybe personal development, and they want to apply logic to the internal emotional world, which exists as the right brain. It is abstract. And so very often people want to know, what they want to measure it, like how many sessions is it going to take for me to reach that place? And here's the thing, and this is part of the feminine principle, is really being what's the word I'm looking for? Having unwavering faith in the mystery. And so that's also part of the feminine, is understanding the mystery, the realm of the unknown. Another part of the feminine principle is, I would say, interconnection with all of life. To really know that there is no separation between nature or us. We are nature. I often think that's the biggest lie we've all bought into. Another part of the feminine principle is collaboration. Yeah, and that goes back primarily to, us being hunter-gatherers, right? Gatherers is a collective experience. So it's that understanding of the collective. And I also really, really want to say here that both these principles are important. It's really bringing them both into harmony and into what the mystery schools really spoke about. All the ancient mystery schools in ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, they really spoke about the initiation was the Heroes Ramos, which means the sacred marriage of bringing these two aspects of us into harmony. This is also, part of, we'll go deeper into this, but this is part of this internal conflict we're all experiencing, whether we're masculine or feminine. If the feminine and masculine principles within you are not trusting one another, that's what creates this internal conflict for us.
Absolutely. You've touched bits and pieces of the things that we want to discuss and talk about in more details. But basically, the idea is that the feminine principle complements what we typically call the masculine principle instead of opposing it. So that's, that there is no, or we try to navigate through and honor both sides of ourselves. Now, and what I really appreciated is when you showed, the qualities of the feminine principles, like, this intuition versus an example of the masculine energy, like critical thinking, right? And now, before we move forward to the to showing really the stages of the heroine journey, one last question on the, how they do come up, both of this parts of ourselves, both energies, they show up, and both in life and in leadership and in the work environment. And how important do you think it is to have both as a leader?
I think where the world is today tells us how important it is. This is a simple aspect, just going on the feminine principle of really an embodied knowing, feeling, being of interconnection with life. We can see that where we are in the world, that has been severed from. There's been a disassociation from our bodies, and our bodies is like a little earth, right? And so that disconnection from self, or disassociation from self, also means we've disassociated from the earth. If we weren't that dissociated, we wouldn't be treating the earth like a commodity. Yeah, we'd be treating the earth, all of her creatures, which we're one of, as sacred living beings. And so why is that important for leaders? It's important because we're wanting to not move and run ahead with creating things that ultimately will cause harm to all.
Mm.
So I think that leaders are already redefining what leadership is, because we can see what is not working.
Mm.
And I think when we're talking about leaders and a way forward, one of the most powerful answers that we can have is we don't know. We all know something's off. We all know something's off. But when we can say we don't know, it means that we stay open and curious. And I think the invitation for the future is for us to step into collective intelligence
Mm.
and
Mm.
co-create the answer together. Because that's really our natural state, is collaboration, not competition.
Mm. Amazing. And that's exactly what the new corporate world, what the new leadership style is going to look like in the future if we want to get things right. Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's where I think that was just generally on the basic principles of the feminine and the masculine, so that we really break down a couple of myths along the way, that it's not about gender, that we actually need both, and that we try and navigate through both qualities, rather than having an internal conflict. Moving forward, what we wanted to touch upon and show in a bit more detail are the individual phases of the heroine journey, and potentially in practical terms. So how does it work in the corporate or other work environments? And maybe we start with the stage one that you briefly mentioned already, the separation from the feminine, the separation from the self, right? And for anyone listening, the journey usually often begins with the separation feeling. We learn how to prioritize the thinking over the feeling, the results over relationships, the speed over depth. And while doing that, we often override our body's signals. We quiet our intuition. We say yes when we mean no. We may be, praised even, and especially in the corporate world, for being strong, for being strategic. But there is a quiet part of us that knows that we're actually abandoning ourselves. And is this the moment that that the heroine journey really starts, where we cut off parts of ourselves, the feeling place, just to survive in the system, right? So how do you see this separation from the feminine? Eleftheria.
I will share a personal story and how that happened for me, and the intention with me sharing that is for you for the listeners to really connect with where that happened for us. So just to preface, for women to understand, is that our first connection with the feminine or the divine feminine is through modeling with our mother. Okay. And if we look at, the previous few generations of women who really grew up in, it's a little bit better for us now, right? But really a hyper masculine world. And it's not that long ago. Yeah. Just 2 generations ago for me, women didn't have voting rights. They, couldn't own land. They couldn't, it's not that far ago. And so understanding that how our ancestors had to survive in a hyper-masculine world. And so this is not to look at our mothers and find any blame or judgment, but really just understanding what children do naturally is look at their environment and internalize. Okay, so we see our mothers, and also parents can't give what they don't have. And we kind of see how she relates to the feminine, but that is our first connection to the feminine. And so I know with my mother, that she really was the Athena archetype of being a very strong businesswoman, and wasn't really connected to the feminine. So I looked at that and I was like, okay, well, I'm just modeling on that. So that's our first separation from the feminine. Then the personal story is, I remember when I was 4 years old, and it was a beautiful summer's day, and I was 5'5", and I love swimming. And I was with my older cousins. They were all 8, 9, 10 years older than me, so they were in their teenage years. And I was swimming, and I just had a bikini bottom on, and I was feeling free, and I was feeling the sun on my skin, and I was, surrounded by family, and it was amazing. And then my cousin said to me, enjoy it while it lasts. And I went, what do you mean? And they said, well, the second you start developing, you're going to have to cover up. And that is the first time I learned that my feminine body is not safe. Yeah. Second disconnection, disassociation from the body and the feminine. Third story, my father always wanted a boy. Yeah, really wanted a boy. Okay. And so naturally, because children really you seek the approval and bonding from your parents, because instinctually you know that is your safety, that is how you survive. And so I was a tomboy. Right? And so this again is the Athena archetype. When we talk about myths, is to become the father's son through the daughter, right? And so how do I gain that approval? And so this is really the disconnect from the feminine. That's where it starts. And I'm sure in these stories you will find your own personal connection, but it's good to reflect on your life and see where it all started. A lot of it is conditioning, a lot of it is, timing, but there will be a personal connection in that. That's the separation from the feminine. So systematically, personally. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this beautiful story. I believe each of us has a story of their own separation that we remember. Mine was very similar. Both. My father wanted to have a son, and both my sister and I, we were acting like, we embodied this expectation almost. And my sister went into motorcycles, so she really embodied that energy. But yeah, I would like to invite our listeners to just reflect in their own lives. What was the story? What is the first memory of that separation? Because each of us have one, and that was the start, basically, where our heroine journey began.
Oh, also just practically, ask me about practically. What does that look like practically? That then means that practically you start over-identifying with a masculine principle. So you then start exactly, you overemphasize in your own life logic. You repress emotion. Overemphasize, productivity maybe, and suppress creativity. So that's what it practically looks like.
Okay. Beautiful. Thank you so much. And then there's the stage 2, which is burnout or crisis, or at a certain point, the strategy of pushing through stops working.
Yeah.
I can confirm that from my own experience. And it might look either as health issues, anxiety, depression, deep sense of meaningless of this rat race. On the outside, nothing seems to be wrong. Like really wrong. We're still performers. We're still high in standards of performers. But on the inside, everything feels wrong. So we often label this as a failure. I know I used to label this as my weakness, right? What's happening? But is it really an invitation to something that's start to ignite within you? So in this heroine journey, what does this descent look like? And if it's not a failure, and I know that by now, but is it a necessary part of this journey?
The awakening, yes. And this is normally at that point, this is where most women come and sit in my office. Yeah. So the invitation I call, that's the catalytic moment. Externally, you've achieved, you've succeeded, but you've done it based on the masculine principle. And so when you find yourself there, most women describe it to me as like feeling completely empty. I know I walk that path as well. You just feel empty. You think, am I not? Is this it? Like, am I supposed to feel different about this? Like the world is telling me that this is success, but I'm not feeling it. And so it's a necessary moment. I think very often what we call an emotional breakdown is actually a spiritual awakening. Right. And so what happens is either we step into that consciously, we really start listening to that intuitive voice that's always there. We just put it on snooze for years. And eventually that whisper becomes a roar. And sometimes we can consciously listen to it and say, okay, there's the call to adventure, right? I'm being called into something different. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to listen and I'm going to follow it. Or when you keep pressing snooze, some life event, either your body says a hard no, burnout, or even at times a really heavy diagnosis like cancer, or a divorce, or a car accident, or something really calls your attention to say, okay, we need to pay attention to this. And this is where, we can really stop, pause, and say, okay, what is missing? And that's when we really turn the lens inwards. There's often a yearning, not knowing what it is, but a yearning to be in sisterhood, or a yearning for the feminine, even if we don't know what that is. And that also comes with its own unpacking, because very often there's a yearning for it, but you don't trust women. It doesn't feel safe to be in a women's circle. Yeah.
And, I'm the structure master. So I think you're already crossing stage 3, which is initiation and reclaiming the feminine. I think this is what you were describing, how in the darkness something new begins. And this is where therapy or coaching or spiritual practice, body work, honest conversations start to appear. And we start to listen to our bodies or honor the boundaries more, reconnect with our needs. And, there's this body wisdom that is trying to tell us something. And we stop and start to listen. So it's the beginning of where we reclaim those parts that we have pushed somewhere far away from us. and this is where we, just listen to our sensitivity, to our intuition, to this emotional truth. And so what do you think it really means to reclaim this feminine principle? Not this time, we're bringing it back in practice, not as a concept, but a lived reality, and what does reclaiming the feminine principle look like in practice for women on this journey? What inner shifts, practices are part of this stage?
Yes. So I can give you some examples of also a lot of the stories that women have told me that started happening to them, especially women in high pressure, let's say corporate environments, is there's an absolute burnout. They take a sabbatical. And during that sabbatical, they start gardening. They start reconnecting with the creative part. They reconnect with nature. It's just a natural kind of like draw. But it's interesting to me that everybody starts a garden. Everybody starts gardening, right? To go back to the soil, go back to the roots, go back to life. And I mean, and there's a lot of science around that, even, about having your fingers in the soil and how that grounds you, and that really helps your nervous system regulate. And there's many things about grounding. And then creativity. So a lot of women, start that. They start taking up meditation. They start becoming really interested in spirituality. And I often say that women need spirituality like they need oxygen. I don't think it's that important for men. But I think women need spirituality. And let me define what I mean by spirituality. What I mean by spirituality, it is that interconnection with life. And so it is understanding that we are inextricably interconnected to all of life, rooted to a power greater than ourselves, that is rooted in love. That, to me, the definition of spirituality. And that could be cooking for somebody, right? It's just something greater than you that really, I would say, is balm for the soul. Gives you a sense of inner peace. It's bigger than you. And that could be anything, right? It could be yoga, it could be cooking, it could be art, it could be gardening. So yes, so that is part of the reclaiming. Then there's also, I often invite women to just curiously start discovering, what is the divine feminine to you? So often I get the question, okay, but what does it look like? Yeah. All of the myths, the feminine is constantly birthing, changing, evolving. There's so many different expressions of her that there isn't one role model. The journey really is to discover what is your authentic expression. It's not always long hair and flowy dresses and bubble baths with, rose petals. It's about finding your authentic expression of it, but it starts with curiously discovering, okay, what is this? I've repressed the divine feminine in my whole life. What is it? What does it look like? Where can I see it? And so that's normally where it starts. That's the reclamation, curiously discovering it. I truly believe that the journey isn't about becoming, but it's about unbecoming. That in that reclamation, you are dismantling all of the conditioning, who you should be, what you should have, what you should look like, right? And really rediscovering what matters to you. What needs do you have that you haven't expressed? Yeah.
Beautiful. I have like goosebumps all over me. I've experienced this. it looked messy. So I think the key,
It looks messy. Yeah, it is
yeah,
messy,
it is. Yeah,
right?
yeah. And and I think that the key here is what you mentioned as curiosity. Welcome it with curiosity instead of bringing in this critical adult or this criticism of judging it, because it's just too messy as opposed to everything that you were taught and conditioned to believe your journey should look like.
Yeah.
And I know that it's for a lot of women to say that this phase is really an unstructured exploration of your needs, of what rings your bells, what makes you happy, and that it isn't a linear process at all.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the where the myth comes in of like, going into the underground, right? Really, really, I mean, we can talk about, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, you let me know. But this
Okay.
is this is the the beauty about the mystery. And that's where you're going to find, that really powerful divine feminine within you. That this is the part where you discover that there is a part of you that knows how to navigate the unknown. And when we've been disconnected from the feminine, like it's really scary. It's a really scary place to be because you don't know how long it's going to take. Who is the other woman that's going to come out on the other side? You don't know who you're going to discover. You
Yes.
don't know how your life is going to change. We fear change on so many levels because we've been
Mm.
conditioned to attach to comfort zone as security.
Mm.
And so this is
Mm.
where when we have support,
Mm.
meaningful conversation with other women,
Mm.
women circles, this is really where we have the allies on the journey with us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I cannot emphasize enough like how or express enough gratitude to the women's circle around me to have helped me be okay with that. Really unbecoming unbecoming everything that I was conditioned to believe. And I think this is a really important part of the journey. And yeah, but I love the mystery, or I'm beginning to love the mystery. I'm as you call it, the recovering control freak,
Yeah.
which, yeah, we're both in that swimming in that pool. So the mystery is beautiful when you allow it. And so, this is something that um, we're not feeling in our comfort zone. It's out of that, and for that reason it feels unnatural, but it is this unbecoming part of the journey that you mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, of course, there is a structure that I'm coming back to. The stage 4 is the return.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's a pay check. So of course, there's a integration back into the work environment, back into the environment we were, right?
Mm-hmm.
To really integrate our journey so far with the existing circumstances that we have. So
Mm-hmm.
eventually, we do come back to our teams, to our roles, to our organizations, and the environment may look the same, but we're not the same anymore. We want to lead differently. We want to set boundaries. We want to make decisions from deeper place than we used to. We're no longer willing to sacrifice our inner truth for people pleasing, for external approvals. And so this tension is, how do we bring this new way of being into systems that haven't changed yet, you know? And so how does now the heroine bring back what she's learned into her leadership or work life or just her private life now being different? What changes in how she leads and makes decisions, or how she relates to power and structure when that feminine principle is integrated? Because what we're discussing now is we're integrating this feminine principle within us. Maybe you shed some light on this.
Yes. Before I answer that question, we have to just jump back to the previous step quickly to understand that, and there's a 6,000-year-old myth, one of the first myths that was written down, called Inanna's Descent. And it describes, I love the Jungian interpretation of it as well, is that Inanna descends into the underworld really representing the unconscious part. And she goes through 7 gates. And at the 7 gates, she has to let go of her crown. She has to let go of her scepter. And this really represents that journey of unbecoming. And the reason I'm going back here is, in order for us to return, there is a process of letting go of and dissolving the old identities. So the person you were before and the person that's returning to the team or the environment are 2 different people. This is really important to know. How does this look practically? What I have seen is some women return to corporate and change systems. They change systems. What I've seen is some women not go back to that work, but develop something else, start a whole different career. Some women start new models, write books, contribute to a different way of leadership. So this is what I've kind of seen. And the woman that returns to the same work environment, what I've seen with some of my clients is they start bringing in a lot of creativity. They start shifting the systems around. They start collaborating. It's very confusing for your team because you go off on sabbatical, you come back and you're a completely different woman. And there's ways to kind of like manage that with teams and companies. And you reintroduce yourself and you go, I've had this awakening. This is what I've learned. And this is what the hero and the heroine's journey truly is all about, is that self-discovery, or the boon or the elixir that you find on this journey is something that's supposed to be offered in service of humanity. Not just for yourself, but it's a gift that you discover that's in service of humanity. So when you go back into those environments, that's when you can start stepping into the collective intelligence. So I often say, all the different intelligences, we have IQ, and IQ in practice breeds competition. Then we have EQ. We learned about EQ. EQ moved us from competition into collaboration. And now we're discovering LQ, which is the love quotient. And with the love quotient, we're moving into co-creation. And we're really moving out of an era of me into we. Because together we know. And that's part of the feminine principle as well, is this collective intelligence of the interconnection of all. So you go back into the work environment and you start bringing in a completely different leadership. And here's complete bias opinion. I believe that facilitation is the new leadership style for the future of work. And facilitating for me really means empowering people. So when you're facilitating something. You are inviting everybody's unique gifts and talents to come to the forefront. And those unique gifts and talents working together is really something to behold. It's meaningful. People are really lacking meaningful work with purpose. We look at all, sorry, I'm going on an ADHD tangent now. But if you look at all the blue zones and people who really live well, it is people who have embodied purpose. And imagine if we have embodied purpose in our teams. You're, again, not performing at work or doing what you've been conditioned to do, but really you bringing your own unique gifts and talents to the project. Yeah.
Wow. That I love this. I love this. But by the way, whenever you're doing a detour, that's where I'm learning to let go of the control. So it's all in perfect order, divine order, as it should be. We learn from each other. I really love this exchange, and I think we should be dedicating at least one of the or future sessions on this new type of organizations where the new leadership models and styles would apply, and who better to bring that into organization than women who have gone through this heroine journey, right? And because I'm pretty sure that everybody is thinking, yeah, well, but not at my organization, right? That's not going to happen. It's too rigid. But it is the source, the feminine is the source of energy, of the source of, the creative power and new and changes and trusting in the unknown, and all of that is required. That's probably a number one requirement, what is really needed in the organizations at this point. So I'm super excited to have that conversation with you, because I think we ought to bring all of the knowledge into the corporate or into the work environment or into the systems, so that we can really show that we could be making changes there. And that's exactly, where we feel like this is the purpose of our lives, because you go in changed and you bring that change to the outer world.
Yeah. And I think you just hit on a very, very important point, is that a lot of women think, well, here's imposter syndrome, right? Like, who am I to make this change? The system will never change. What can I do to bring about change? And I think that's the first thing about reclaiming the feminine, is to remember just your sacred presence alone, stepping into a room, affects the whole room. If we look at this again in practical ways, like we now, the Heart Math Institute has done a lot of research on this. We now know science has now backed what spirituality and these philosophies have been telling us for years, is that we co-regulate our nervous systems. And so just by stepping into a room, being fully grounded and with presence already shifts and changes the room. And when people's nervous systems are regulated, we think differently, we behave differently, we're open to innovation, because it's a safe space for us to actually fail, to safe space for us to share that one crazy thought you think nobody else would pay attention to, but that might just be the crazy thought that resolves everything and changes everything. And it's small steps. We don't have to save the whole world in one way. But what I've seen practically here's an example. Once I kind of made a joke with one of my clients who was a CEO at a company, and she went through this journey, and I kind of just said, well, why don't you just put on your door your menstrual cycle and say on day 28, don't come into my office with a problem, right? Because it's not going to end well. Like, this is just, I can't even, it's just not going to work. And I kind of joked with her, and this is another thing I think with our work environment is really a system and a structure that's designed for the masculine body. It is not designed for the feminine body. Yet there's so much wisdom in women's bodies and their cycles. And if we moved sales according to those cycles, we moved meetings according to those cycles, wow, things would be different. Anyway, this super brave lady decided to take me seriously, and she put her cycle on her door, and I think also just experiment happen, and the office loved it. They loved it. They had less conflict. They were like, "Ooh, day 27, 28, this can wait until day 30," and it changed communication. She brought in more cycles. That it was so different. Men and women really supported this.
Wow.
So it's little tiny things that we can start implementing. Yeah. Starting a meeting with mindfulness.
Mm.
Right.
Mm.
Starting a meeting with some creativity or some movement, or right.
Mm. Absolutely.
Becoming more human with one another. So let's let's get to know the humans we really work with. What's most important to you? That's relational intelligence. And when we start bringing that back into our systems, and it naturally starts shifting and changing.
Yeah. Which brings me to the point I wanted to make was that, this, when we are coming from the system, and we have this narrative or prevailing belief that the systems cannot be changed. Watch what happens. I always say, like, do the work and go through the journey and make that change internally within yourself, and then just watch what happens on the outside. It's you don't have to believe any of this. You need to experience it in order to, you'll believe it when you see it in your environment. What is possible when you really embody this specific change internally? But the story that you mentioned, with the menstrual cycle being in the front door of an office is really tying into one of our next topics, which it revolves around patriarchic society, because that's probably one of the first autopilot thoughts that our listeners would have. No, not in this society, right? And the reason why we say not in this society is because we still live in a patriarchic society that condemns this type of connecting to the feminine, and this is something that we wanted to touch upon. Eleftheria, you're perfectly in sync with the flow of the next topics, because you also mentioned the imposter syndrome. So these two topics are basically the demons on our heroine journey, right? Because as we move deeper into the heroine's journey, we need the two forces. It's probably much more, but the two main forces that create the trap that so many women experience. So one is the patriarchy on the outside, and the other is internal, the imposter syndrome on the inside. Patriarchy shapes the systems we work in, and the imposter syndrome shapes the beliefs we carry within those systems, right? And so together, they perfectly keep the most capable women of the society doubting themselves instead of stepping in their full power and full potential, to really make the changes we need and to see in this world. And so on that note, so on patriarchy, just to define it, because we see a lot of different narratives and stories around it. It's how we see it is a social system that just gives men more power than women, and not because of merit or ability, but because the system was designed that way, right? And that is maintained through tradition, through habit, through our unconscious compliance to it. And that is making the patriarchy one half of the trap, if you want, the outer part. And we could be talking about patriarchal system for hours, right? But instead, what I suggest is we dedicate a whole session to it, to really pin it down. But we today rather shift to the other half of the trap, which is the imposter syndrome, if you don't mind, if that makes sense. And we discuss now the imposter syndrome, the hidden trait of high performing women, which is one of our inner hidden dragons on the heroine journey, that looks like this. So she's the one that everyone turns to when something really matters or something is wrong. Her performance reviews are glowing. She's prepared. She's respected. She's reliable. Yet before every big presentation or high stakes meeting or performance, there's one same thought. What if this is the moment everybody realizes that I'm not actually that good? By the way, that happened to me, that I caught that thought just before we had the podcast, right? I caught that same thought.
Yeah.
And so that woman, and that's you, that's me, that's everybody. She over prepares, she overworks, she over delivers. Not because she's not capable, but because she deeply doubts her own enoughness. And the paradox is that the pattern is often, and that's where we really need to talk about the imposter syndrome. The pattern is often the strongest with women who are most competent and most capable or strong. The self-doubt becomes almost a companion, to their excellence. The higher they go, the higher we go, the louder the inner critic. And so if the competence isn't the problem, what is this inner voice that keeps telling high-performing women that they're a fraud?
Yes, great topic. Right, let's start. So I would like to start. I know we're going to go into patriarchal systems, fully into another section, but I just want to start with that to say this system, I think everybody, both men and women, are really tired of. And so I think that there's a collective call for it to change. I just want to start with that. Secondly, I think it's also very important for us to know that imposter syndrome is experienced by both men and women. Some studies were done. In 2020, KPMG did a study, and all 75% of all high executive leaders who are women experienced imposter syndrome. Another study showed that 84% of entrepreneurs have imposter syndrome. Another study showed that 80% of all CEOs at some point experience imposter syndrome and think, what am I doing here? So I think the first thing for us to really know, because we don't talk about it, is that everyone experiences it. Research also shows, though, that women experience it more than men. So it's a collective experience, but women experience it more so than men. Why? Again, we're looking at, some conditioning, some systems, which are kind of just designed for majority kind of bias. And you're aware of that. I think I've had the deep privilege of working with women around the globe from different walks of life, from Fortune 500 companies to women who are truly impoverished in kind of South Africa. And when you look at all of those, right, that there's such common threads in our experience, culturally also. And I remember experiencing it myself as well, and I can share the story, and with a practice which really worked for me. So I find myself in this online meeting, and it's a group of women, and I was invited to this meeting, and there's really women that I would maybe really, really admire, and from all different sections of society. So that there's politicians, and there's like executive leaders, and all of these women, and I'm sitting in this Zoom room thinking, what am I doing here? How did I even get into this meeting? Like, do I just like go, sorry, internet's not working, like jump out of it? Like, what am I doing? How did I even get here? And then I thought, wow, okay, hello, thank you, imposter syndrome, right? And it's really learning how to hear that imposter syndrome. And I always believe in working with the shadow self in terms of really welcoming it and go, wow, thank you. Like, you're letting me know that there's a little part of me that just feels like a fraud, and feels really, really scared, and what is happening right now inside of me. So I just took a breath and really just became present in my body. Just, you resource yourself, ground yourself, you go, whew, okay, thank you for those thoughts. Super creative. Our thoughts can be very, very creative. And then I just invited, there's also another part of us that is the innocent child in all of us, that's really about a 2-year-old that's just in awe and wonder of the world, and everything new that they discover, they really embody curiosity. So can I resource myself and tap into curiosity? And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to be curious about this meeting. I have no idea what my purpose here is. But I'm going to stay curious, because either way, this is super valuable. I know that I'm going to learn so much from all these women in this meeting. And close to the end of the meeting, most of these women start sharing that for most of their careers, they have only worked with teams of men, and they have no idea how to work with women, and that they feel very disconnected from the divine feminine. And I was like, I'm here. This is why I'm here. This is, this is how I can contribute. I want to contribute. And if I had really listened to that imposter syndrome and And it can spiral you. It can take you through a shame spiral and guilt spiral. And if I had stayed in that and let those thoughts really take me down, I would have been disconnected. I wouldn't even have heard that invitation. I wouldn't have really paid attention. I would have felt really bad about myself at the end of that meeting, even further, the self-sabotaging thoughts through the shame spiral. You could have said this, you could have said that. Why didn't you? But, all of that talk and dialogue. So the first thing in imposter syndrome is really learning how to listen to the internal dialogue. And the internal dialogue, it's kind of like 5 voices. So the first one is the critical parent, right? Then there's also the nurturing parent. That's your inner cheerleader. That's the person that goes, you got this, girl. Of course, there's a reason that you're in this meeting. I mean, you wouldn't have received this invitation if somebody didn't think at least, that you've got something valuable to contribute to it. Then there's the wounded child, which is, oh, God, I'm not good enough. They're not going to like me. Remembering the moment, when somebody rejected you as a friend when you were younger, that's really what comes up. So it's the wounded child. And what does she need? She just needs you to say, I'm here. I feel you. I can feel that, these emotions are coming up and I love you. And we're okay. And you are enough. You are enough. And then we have the innocent child, that's the curiosity. And then we have that intuitive guidance. And so we're wanting almost to see these 5 voices in us, this internal dialogue. We almost want to imagine that this is a circle of women sitting around a fire. We want to get all of them to work together. We don't want them to compete or, so this is working with the internal dialogue to really hear that. Then it's looking at, imposter syndrome from 4 different archetypes. And the first one is, the perfectionist. Yeah. We all know her. She wants to be perfect and she won't contribute anything unless all of the preparation is done perfectly. And her standards are so unrealistically high that she puts so much pressure on herself that she overfunctions continuously and then creates exhaustion for herself, right? That's the one archetype of imposter syndrome. The second one is the people pleaser or the overgiver, right? This is also really overgiving in terms of seeking approval. That's also one of the archetypes. Then we have the superwoman, right? Superwoman, hyper independent. She does everything. She is the perfect mother, the perfect friend, the perfect colleague, the perfect CEO, the perfect, just everything. Also leads up to burnout and exhaustion. And then we have the lone wolf, and this superwoman and the lone wolf, very similar but different. The lone wolf believes that she has to do everything by herself and cannot ask for any support because that would be weakness. So those are the different kind of archetypes. And again, some of them will overlap, but when we can start seeing how these archetypes show up in us, we can start again identifying how to shift this, which situations do they come up most? And the kind of advice that I very often give women who are dealing with this and to help us move over it, I don't think the imposter syndrome is ever not going to show up. Okay. I don't think it ever goes away. But can we make it our ally rather than trying to get rid of it? Right? So can you invited in, for example, when I'm in that meeting or if imposter syndrome comes up, I go, wow, this must be really important to me.
Mm.
I'm hearing this voice. It matters to me.
Yeah.
And so can I just invite this voice or the imposter syndrome to say, this matters. Okay, great. I'm paying attention. I'm being present, coming back into my body. But the thing that I often encourage women to do when it comes to really working with imposter syndrome, and this is also part of the embodiment of the feminine principle, is can we just stop for a moment and celebrate all of the great things and little things that you do? Because we don't stop, pause, and receive. And receiving is the feminine principle. And that means just acknowledging yourself. And it doesn't have to be big achievements, it's the tiny things. Today, my team really, I felt, I facilitated cohesion today in the team. And they're all good. Wow. Right? Today, I really showed up. It was a difficult meeting, and I stayed, present with it. And can I just receive that? Wow. Right. And then what I say is I often invite women to use creativity and to make like an art journal. And the art journal is called Love Notes to Self. And then you write down all the things people thank you for. And what people thank you for is normally really authentically you. You don't even pay attention to it. Most women, when you get a compliment, right, you just bat it away immediately. Okay, so that's also about receiving the compliment. Learn to just cringe on the inside and say thank you, and then write the note to yourself later. But what people thank you for is normally your gifts and your talents. That's what people thank you for. And so when we have this book that we create, when imposter syndrome comes up, you go, where are my love notes to self? Because that's my evidence. Here's the evidence. And can I just receive that?
Amazing. Wow. Wow. I love how you describe this 4 archetypes through stories and, really vividly described it so that we can recognize it every time it comes up. It comes up. And what I've heard you say is that, it often that moment of that inner dialogue happens usually when we are in the midst of just giving something, a performance that is important to us, and that that there is a moment of decision where we either suppress the feminine principle within ourselves, or we have that safe space of feeling all of the things that we all 4 voices inside us, and really invite them to show us what they have come to teach us. And so that is very powerful tool that you've offered. And I think a lot of us having that experience is just thinking about how do you squeeze that into 2 minutes before the big hit, the big performance, the stage, the people listening. Is there anything you want to add to that for those 2 minutes of our time?
Yes, absolutely. So I've been doing public speaking. Here's another personal example, but definitely a tool that you'd be able to use. Been doing public speaking for 25 years, and I'm absolutely fine until 5 minutes beforehand.
Same here.
I'm cool as a cucumber. I'm sitting there, in the audience waiting for my time. And 5 minutes beforehand, I almost feel like I want to have a panic attack. And that's always been with me. And years ago, I went to hypnotherapy to move past this. I, went through psychology to see was there stage fright that happened when I was, doing a ballet concert I was looking for the answers to become the perfect in control public speaker. Until I listened to an interview of the lead singer of U2, Bono. And he was doing an interview and he was talking about how he just vomited in a bucket before he walked out on stage to do the interview. And he was talking about stage fright. And he was saying, that it's been like that for him for 40 years, just part of his process. This is what he does. And I for the first time, I thought, wow, what if I actually just gave myself permission to have this little nervous system breakdown beforehand? Because I know that like once I get started, I'm good to go. But there's that 5 minutes of discomfort that I have to resource myself. And so here are my tools. 5 minutes before, maybe 7 minutes before I go up, I run into the bathroom, I look into the mirror, and I do mirror work. And that's when I really intentionally speak to myself and go, okay, ground yourself, deep breaths in, regulate your nervous system. What is your intention? Your intention is to leave people inspired, empowered with more of themselves. I then invite what I like to call, everybody's got different words for this, but we all have this wise woman within us, or some people call it your higher self. Other people call it, your soul. I like to call it your Sophia self. Sophia in Greek means wisdom. And so I invite her to speak through me. And then I will feel the nervousness. And then the second tool I can offer you is nervousness in the body and excitement feel exactly the same way. Clammy hands, dry mouth, heart racing, nervous and excited. So every time I start thinking I'm nervous, I think I'm excited. I'm excited. And that in itself, just reframing that, calms the nervous system. Then it's my time. They call my name. They introduce me. And the first thing I do with the audience is I get them to breathe. Not for them, for me. So I'll ask everybody to take 3 deep breaths in, and then I thank the audience and I say, thank you so much. That actually, I needed that. But thank you. And that I connect, but I start with vulnerability and being 100% authentic. So this is really, this is what I can. And I know, again, you will have your own unique way of tapping into that, but these are the tools.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And that's really empowerment, having that toolbox with you all the time that you perfect, that you carry from one performance to another. And I think that's also part of the journey. And I really want to thank you here for offering this concrete tools that I have been using throughout my journey and my performances. And they have helped a great deal. And so if this toolbox is one thing, I think the other part of what helps is and I think this is one of the most powerful truths that you've shared, is that, first of all, that the imposter syndrome never goes fully away, regardless of how perfect how much we perfect ourselves and how perfect our performance is. And that moment, and the second truth is that you mentioned that, that moment of the inner dialogue happens to everybody. the CEOs, the business owners, the small business owners, like coaches, people who teach the very same topic, and then talk about stage performance. Now, I think this is a part where we're dismantling all the bullshit that we were told never happens to the people that are good enough in our books, Yeah. And knowing this also makes it easier to really empower yourself that it happens to everyone and it will never get different. It's a process. It's a part of the process. And here are the tools. So I really loved this part of the narrative. And I did start writing the magic book of all the wins, the small wins of the magic that happens while going on this journey and having this toolbox with me. And whenever there's that moment where you doubt yourself, I think that's a pretty powerful tool to look at, to see, you see, that's where I won. And this is another win. And this is another magic and that I've experienced. So I really encourage that. Great. Okay, now I would like to invite you to another important conversation, Eleftheria, and to bring in this concept that we talked about, also the witch wound.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The inherited, internalized fear that women carry around being visible and powerful and intuitive and outspoken and different.
Mm-hmm.
If the imposter syndrome tells women that we're not good enough, then the witch wound tells them it's dangerous and not safe to be too much visible. Yeah. So that's something that I think is a really powerful part of the journey, and I know that you speak about it a lot. So I would love to hear some more of it.
Sure. Yes. For me, the witch wound and imposter syndrome are really interconnected for women completely. Mm-hmm. What do we mean by the witch wound? I think firstly, again, it's about it's really acknowledging and understanding that we as women have whether we directly or indirectly experienced it, a lot of beliefs have been passed down from our mothers to us for safety. And if we think about it this way, the last witch was burnt in Scotland in the 1900s. That's not a very long time ago. And so this is only a couple of generations ago. And part of, the witch trials worked in many ways to divide and conquer, right? And so the persecutors, let's say, would come into a village and grab the first woman and say, you're a witch unless you can point out another witch. Mm. And think about that, what that does to the psyche. Firstly, the person that has to choose their life, their family life, over betraying another woman. Mm. How that then creates, self-abandonment and breaking down the bonds between women. Mm. It was a very effective strategy. And so also let's just define what a witch is, right? Mm-hmm. And so during the witch trials, basically it wasn't witches that was burnt, it was women, right? And so it was women who had leadership roles, women who were the medicine woman in the village, maybe, in modern terms, maybe HR, maybe, women who really cared for the community and maybe had positions kind of power, but also at the same time, because it's very natural for women to be the space holders and the keepers of wisdom and to take care of the entire community. I often say, women are really like glue. And so you'll find that if the matriarch in a family kind of passes, the one that keeps the whole family together, when she passes away, the whole family disintegrates, right? So it is naturally our gift to hold and take care of the whole community. So how does that affect us still today? Especially in terms of imposter syndrome, is we think about it, our mothers, because of that experience, mothers hand down, beliefs, even though it's not relevant today anymore, but you would be taught to stay small, to stay safe. You'd be taught that don't rock the boat, don't be different. And the messaging from the mothers, really the intention was safety, for you to be safe. And part of that experience also, which is still in our collective kind of psyche, is so it's not safe to be visible. It's not safe to speak your truth. It's not safe to express your natural gifts and talents. And I've seen this so much, especially with women in the wellness industry, right? That's super passionate about herbs, or super passionate about healing, or super passionate. There's really some steps that they need to step over to heal all of that within themselves to move forward. And I think it's relevant for all women. You feel, I mean, I remember that was definitely a part of, my first breakthrough that I needed to have to do public speaking.
Yeah.
It really was. I mean, I can't think about anything in childhood that really, I was on stage and, but just having the full attention of a huge crowd, I mean, my body feel incredibly unsafe. Didn't have to do with being rejected or people not liking, what I'm saying. This was way deeper than that. And so I really had to start unpacking that. So I think we certainly have, we're affected by it, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. But directly connected to you embodying your gifts and talents and bringing that visibly into the world. And also merely just being in embodying the presence of the divine feminine can feel unsafe. And then, of course, the sister wound of why we don't trust one another. And the biggest gift to see is seeing women arrive in women's circle feeling really uncomfortable, feeling not safe, feeling again a little bit of like, what am I doing here? I don't know if this thing is for me. I'm not sure. And to see the absolute healing and magic and grace and a coming home to self that happens in circle when we can start learning how to trust one another again and move back into sisterhood, which is part of where the heroine's journey is about as well. It's about reclaiming that healthy, supportive, empowering sisterhood.
Amazing. Yeah. Because the patriarchy is teaching us that, that the feminine or that women are in competition, and that serves the system. And, that is a part of the wounded feminine. But I do see how women's circles really help integrate this narrative around the wounded feminine, how they help heal, how it's like a medicine that we're witnessing each other, imperfect, not ready, not good enough, not being being visible and being in power or empowered. So all of that, it's a true miracle to witness that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Balm for the soul. I really believe that it's medicine, and I think you really hit on something very important. It's being witnessed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing, if it's being facilitated in a way where it's really a safe space, psychologically safe space, what you start seeing, and this is really my joy, my absolute joy, is what you start seeing is that circle starts sharing their wisdom, and it becomes collective wisdom. And the circle, there's no hierarchy. We're all equal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's start seeing these beautiful, that I truly believe that everybody has their own answers. We really have all the answers to every question we'll ever ask.
Mm-hmm.
And just releasing the barriers that tell you that you don't have those, or you can't access it, and when you're seeing that collective wisdom just being echoed, you just think, I just sit in awe. I just go, this is so beautiful.
Yeah, and the part of this divine design is that always blows my mind in the circles is the roles that we play in each other. Is like, even if we don't if we're not familiar with each other or are not otherwise outside of the circle, relating to one another, how we come in the circle and play that crucial role, where you hold the space for someone and you learn from that. Like, let's say, for example, one of the women is experiencing a divorce and having a third person coming into in the between of the relationship. And then there's a woman in the circle, another woman that is having the role of that third person. So they literally sort of hold each other's space, and learn from each other of that role, and really where you can witness is this compassion, this love that we have for each other, and know that we're all magically connected somehow, and how we help each other heal. This is really, really divine design. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. This is beautiful, in theory and in concept, and we always want to bring back the practical terms. How is it that the whole journey that we just went through comes, and the feminine principle that we talked about in the beginning, comes to fruition in practice, and in leadership, in the corporate. How does it look like on a Monday morning at 10 a.m. in a meeting? Is how does this leading from the feminine principle actually looks like? So like many of us get this theoretical part, but the real question is, you're in a leadership meeting, and or yesterday I had tough negotiations, or you have a conflict with a colleague, and the key question is really, how do we bring the feminine principle into the room without losing our credibility, without losing our impact? If I lead, the question is like, if I lead from the feminine side, will I still be respected? Will I still be effective? or will I lose my edge? And so can we lead from the feminine principle and still be seen as strong, clear, effective, right? So maybe we close this theoretical part with a really practical context, if you don't mind that.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I mean, I think that is probably some of the most important questions that a lot of female leaders ask themselves is, and I know that is a challenge that they find themselves, is like, will they take me seriously? Will I still get, will it still be productive? Will it still? And so I think a great invitation here is for whoever listens to this to bring those examples to us. I know I can share a lot of examples that I've experienced personally with my clients and my students. And what we're seeing at the moment is there's a lot of female CEOs that have brought feminine principles into companies, and the companies have been more productive. They've had, more profit. They've had, so there are already case studies out there that this is happening. And we want to hear from people, ordinary people, where they have started one or two different practices and have seen a different outcome. So just practically, I think that the first limitation to get over is to tell yourself that you won't be credible, that you won't be respected. Because that in itself is a little bit of imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
The second thing is to be curious and invite people in on this and say, let's try a different way. The third thing is that rooting into the presence, rooting in divine feminine presence, and then step into that meeting. So slowing down, slow it down. That's what I would say. And then practically as well is, I think, what's very often helpful, truly helpful, is, especially in teams, is to have allies, right? And male and female allies, but especially male allies that support you.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's having these deep, meaningful conversations with some allies to say, this is what I'm thinking. This is how I'm thinking to change the Monday morning meetings. Would you support me in this? Let's see how it unfolds. And then also inviting the entire group along. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense.
What I would say.
Yeah. And this is the perfect practice. There's research that it was publicized several times now that, and for the first time in history probably, is where the research established that a product is better has better characteristics, better performance, more efficient, better design if it is being produced by diverse teams, meaning having to cover all different aspects of it. Like, for example, a car, if you look at the car, in really going practical, right? And the feminine, the women part of the team would take care of the comfort in the car, right? And the male team members would take care of the efficiency and the speed and coming from point A to point B in a faster and more efficient way. And so the product together, if you put all of these aspects together, the product, the car is overall much better because of coming out of this, collaboration. And I think I really want to put this knowledge or this advice the tip that you shared in practice, like next week already, with having an ally that you can discuss something, an idea or whatever that bothers you, just to have some different insights and do that integration within you, and then in your work environment, in your systems, in your life. I think that's really powerful, and I think that is where we've come, and I think it's a beautiful message to close our conversation with, is the key isn't to stay separate. The key is the harmony. The key is to bring the both principles together, to work together, because ultimately the result is so much better.
Yeah.
Thank you, Eleftheria, for this wonderful conversation so far. I'm really grateful we've had this, and we had the courage to do this. And the last part is just really this closing reflection and invitation to the listeners. If the heroine journey starts with the feeling that something is off, and then maybe the most courageous act is simply to listen to that feeling and not push it away, right? Mm-hmm. So it's, the feminine principle in us speaks through our bodies, through our emotions, through intuition, our longing for something. That's the feminine principle within us, right? And so the question is, will we give it more space? And in Eleftheria, for someone who's listening and who recognizes themselves in this conversation, what's the one small concrete step that they can do to honor that feminine principle in their life or leadership? Do you think?
Good question. I think you just answered that as well. It's like the first step is just listening. Listening, and being kind of the sacred witness to the internal world. And an invitation would be for us to, start relating to ourselves the way we do with the people around us that we really love. And I think that is the first step, is just how can you treat yourself with more kindness, more compassion? And because you know how to do it. You do it for other people all the time. And so how can you just offer that compassion, listening and witnessing for yourself? And then, I know this is maybe a big ask, but maybe just take a chance and trust your intuition. What is your intuitive feeling telling you about what the next step is? That would be the invitation.
Beautiful. Yeah. Just pause, listen, see what happens if you give it more space. Love that. Thank you very much for this beautiful conversation. I cannot express the gratitude to have you in this conversation, to shed the light on this journey that we all experience. It just made us feel a little less alone in the journey, and maybe you have some closing remarks before I invite our listeners to provide some feedback.
Yeah. Well, I also just really want to express my gratitude to you for initiating this. It was a wonderful, initiation and co-creation. I think the invitation also is for if this serves our listeners and they have specific topics or they have any questions, please write it in the comments or email us. Yeah, we're happy to continue. And I think our invitation is to stay present with the mystery and practice the feminine principle of seeing the unfoldment. And that's how we can stay in curiosity, gratitude, and follow the intuitive wisps. So thank you. And thank you for listening.
Beautiful. Beautiful. The only thing I would like to add is that, like what Eleftheria mentioned is like your insights would help us grow and refine our conversations. So we would really like to hear what fascinates you, what would you like to hear next, what matters to you the most, because your input really shapes our journey as we embark on this unknown, the feminine through the feminine aspects. And yeah, so that's what I would really like to hear back from you. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Good.